Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Sagar Bhanushali. I'm a second year DNB resident, Sheffield Hospital. Today, I will be presenting a presentation on liver cirrhosis. Uh, it will be including introduction, epidemiology, causes, pathophysiology of liver cirrhosis, clinical features, investigations and complications, and the treatment of liver cirrhosis. So basically, cirrhosis is a condition that is defined histopathologically and has a variety of clinical manifestation and its complication. So cirrhosis is a diffuse process of fibrosis that converts the liver architecture into structurally abnormal nodules. So liver, which normally attempts to regenerate the any disease pathology, but if there is a disorganized regenerative process, that can lead to uh, abnormal blood vessels and bile duct formation, which leads to new fibrosis. Connective tissue distorts the liver's normal structure, impedes blood flow, and poor cellular nutrition, which results in hypoxic liver injury and insult. So, the epidemiologically, the most common cause of cirrhosis worldwide are alcohol abuse, cryptogenic cirrhosis, and viral hepatitis B and C. In many urban countries in India, alcohol abuse accounts for more than 50% of the cases. With increasing prevalence of obesity and metabolic syndrome, the incidence of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease-related cirrhosis is now rising in trend. Uh, Includes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in India seems to occur even in lean individuals, usually a central obesity. The average daily intake of 80 grams of alcohol for 10 to 20 years is required for the development of cirrhosis in Western world, whereas in Indian population, due to small quantities of uh, with small quantities of alcohol also there is a development of cirrhosis due to small built uh, nutritional deficiency, adulterants in beverages, high frequency of binge drinking, and high frequency of concurrent hepatitis infection. uh, Etiological factors. Causes of cirrhosis are alcoholism, then chronic viral hepatitis B and C, autoimmune hepatitis, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, biliary cirrhosis, which includes primary biliary cholangitis, sclerosing cholangitis, autoimmune cholangiopathy. Other will be cardiac cirrhosis, inherited metabolic liver disease, which includes Wilson's disease, hematochromatosis, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, cystic fibrosis. So basic pathophysiology will be initially there is always an inflammation. Inflammation will lead to the distension of the liver capsules, which lead to the pain and fever, nausea, vomiting, anorexia, and fatigue symptoms. Whereas which later on leads to liver necrosis. Liver necrosis, the there will be an hormonal metabolism alteration which may lead to complication like testicular atrophy. There will be increased androgen and estrogen due to reduced metabolism in liver, which leads to its complication like gynecomastia, loss of blood hair, body hair, menstrual dysfunction, spider angiomas, and pulmonary erythemas, and increased ADH and aldosterone, which leads to edema. Whereas there will be liver function will be deranged, which can lead to decreased bilirubin metabolism. Therefore, it will be leading to jaundice, hyperbilirubinemia. Second will be decreased bile in the gastrointestinal tract, which leads to light colored stools. Decreased synthesis of vitamin K as well as absorption, which may lead to increase in INR and bleeding tendency. Increased urobilinogen, which will lead to dark colored urine. There will be a decreased metabolism of protein, carbohydrate, fat. So there will be a recurrent complication of hypoglycemia, decreased plasma protein. Therefore, will also lead to secondary ascites and edema and secondary fluid collection. This will all gradually lead to liver failure, hepatic ANCAF, hepatic coma, death. Whereas liver necrosis will further lead to liver fibrosis and scarring of the liver, which may lead to complications like portal hypertension. Portal hypertension will secondarily lead to ascites, edema, splenomegaly. Splenomegaly will lead to anemia, thrombocytopenia, and leukopenia. Uh, Esophageal varices. Varices will be esophageal and gastric varices. Hemorrhoids, superficial abdominal veins, caput medusae will be seen. There will be increased AST and ALT, alkaline phosphatase, increased bilirubin, increased prothrombin time, and decreased serum albumin, as said earlier. So, alcoholic liver cirrhosis. The concentration of alcohol in alcoholic beverages usually we label in the percentage of alcohol of volume. So the standard drink is usually defined as serving that contain about 14 grams of pure ethanol. So the amount of alcohol ingested every week and the duration of the alcohol intake in a year is the most important predictor for development of alcoholic liver disease. The risk of development of cirrhosis increase markedly with consumption of more than 60 to 80 grams per day, that is 4 to 6 standard drinks per day for more than 10 years for men, and for women it is 20 to 30 grams per day, that is 2 standard drinks per day for more than 10 years for a woman. So other is the recent trending is the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is most common chronic liver disease in many parts of the world and rising trend in Indian population also. They're strongly associated with obesity and insulin resistance, that is metabolic uh, however can occur in lean individual also. There is a simple accumulation of triglyceride within the hepatocyte is one of the most clinical benign on extreme spectrum. So non-alcoholic liver disease initially will lead to liver cell inflammation and death, which further leads to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Recently there have been found that there are genes involved in the NASH pathology, which are PNPLA3, that is intracellular trafficking of lipid, and other gene is TM6SF2 and MBO87, which are responsible, the gene which is responsible for lipid homeostasis as emerging potential for genetic risk factors. So uh, diagnose pathogenesis will be in NASH is there will be basically three pathologies pathogenesis. There is increase in triglyceride synthesis and reduce its degradation. Second will be there is reduced intestinal barrier function, which stimulates liver cell to generate inflammatory mediators that inhibits insulin action. And third will be obese adipose depot also produce excessive soluble factors like adipokines that also inhibits the insulin sensitivity. So basically this all will lead to hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia will stimulate pancreas to release insulin, so there will be a hyperinsulinemia. This hyperinsulinemia will promote more lipid uptake and fat synthesis and storage, which will lead to furtherly steatosis. Triglyceride per se is not basically hepatotoxic, but the precursors and metabolic products do. And recently, the non-invasive trend for diagnosis of NASH is liver elastography, which usually helps in uh, which helps for imaging test that checks for the liver fibrosis. Fibrosis is a condition that reduces the blood flow to and inside the liver. So other invasive test which is more diagnostic is liver biopsy. Uh, treatment will be basically the treatment of the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease related comorbidities like diabetes, dyslipidemia, and treatment of its complication. So, in past, metformin mainly improved the hepatic insulin sensitivity, which was seen in tonic study carried out, but did not improve the liver histology of children in tonic study with NASH. So later on, thiazolinidones, which includes pioglitazone and rosiglitazone in adult with NASH, improved systemic insulin resistance. But both pioglitazone and rosiglitazone reduce aminotransferase and improve some of the histological features of NASH, out of which rosiglitazone with 5 years of follow-up study suggested of no significant reduction in liver fibrosis, and there was an increased risk of cardiovascular mortality and hence now not recommended, that is rosiglitazone. However, pioglitazone is associated with reduced overall mortality and myocardial infarction and stroke. Still, all are under vitamin E, which is an potent antioxidant, which is given as 800 international unit, has found to be an till now the best treatment uh, as a supportive care. Basically, the clinical features in liver cirrhosis will be early manifestation and late manifestation. So, early manifestation is usually the onset is usually insidious in onset with a GI disturbance initially occurs like anorexia, dyspepsia, flatulence, nausea, vomiting, change in bowel habits, abdominal pain, fever, weight loss, and enlarged liver or spleen. And late manifestation may show hepatocellular failure and portal hypertension. These are the basically from head to toe manifestations seen in liver cirrhosis, which includes neurological, gastrointestinal, reproductive, cardiovascular, metabolic, hematological, and integumented. So neurologically, hepatic NCAF, which will be seen in later stage peripheral neuropathy and stresses, whereas gastrointestinal anorexia, nausea, vomiting, dull abdominal pain, fetal hepatitis, gastric and esophageal varices, hematemesis, hemorrhoids. Whereas reproductive includes amenorrhea, testicular atrophy, gynecomastia in males, and impotency. As hematologically, anemia, thrombocytopenia, leukopenia, coagulation disorder, metabolic hypokalemia, hyponatremia, albuminemia. Cardiovascular will be including fluid retention, peripheral edema. So basically, the signs of liver cell failure. Signs of it includes alopecia, then xanthelasma, fetal hepaticus, jaundice, parotid enlargement, gynecomastia, loss of secondary sexual characters, spider nevi, pulmonary edema, Dupuytren's contracture, and asterixis, that is liver. So this is basically an spider nevi. So how to look for an spider nevi? So you should take a pin with a blunted and should be pressed in the uh, center of the vessels. So as soon as it is released, the blood vessels open up and it starts flowing from center to the periphery, showing like a spider legs. uh, the first image is xanthelasma, second is yellowish discoloration of sclera suggestive of jaundice, third is pulmonary erythema due to estrogen excess, and fourth is Dupuytren's contracture and asterixis. Investigation, most important investigation to be done is CBC, which includes most important marker is thrombocytopenia, is low platelet counts, followed by leukopenia, anemia. AST by ALT ratio is more than 2. In alcoholic liver disease, the ALT ratio, ALT, that is ALT is reduced, since because ALT requires 5 pyridoxine for its metabolism and synthesis, but it's deficient in alcoholic patients, hence ALT significantly reduced, leading to AST by ALT ratio more than 2. Second, increased prothrombin time, since decrease in vitamin K synthesis by liver, decrease albumin and globulin. Basically, albumin is synthesized in liver, so there will be a decrease in albumin, leading to reversible of albumin globulin ratio, glucose intolerance, and electrolyte disturbance. So complication of cirrhosis will be portal hypertension, which be including gastroesophageal varices, portal hypertensive gastropathy, splenomegaly, hypersplenism, ascites, spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Then it will be hepatorenal syndrome, which we classified into type 1 and type 2, hepatic encephalopathy, hepatopulmonary syndrome, portopulmonary hypertension, malnutrition, coagulopathy leading to factors deficiency, fibrinolysis, thrombocytopenia, bone disorders like osteopenia, osteoporosis, osteomalacia, anemia, hemolysis, thrombocytopenia. So portal hypertension. So basically, it is defined as an elevation in of the hepatic venous pressure more than 5 mm of Hg or 12 centimeter of water. Uh, it is basically a combination of two simultaneous process occurring, that is increase in intrahepatic resistance, which leads to decreased passage of blood flow, increased plankenic blood flow secondary to vasodilatation. Uh, the two major complications are variceal hemorrhage and ascites. Variceal hemorrhage is immediate life-threatening condition with 20 to 30% of mortality rate associated with each episode of bleeding. So it is characterized by increased venous pressure in portal circulation, splenomegaly, ascites, large collateral veins, esophageal varices, systemic hypertension. Classifications of portal hypertension. So it will be pre-hepatic, hepatic, and post-hepatic. Prehepatic includes portal vein thrombosis, splenic vein thrombosis, massive splenomegaly, which is also called as Bunty syndrome. Whereas hepatic will be of further three subtypes: pre-sinusoidal, sinusoidal, post-sinusoidal. So pre-sinusoidal will be caused by schistosomiasis, congenital hepatic fibrosis. Sinusoidal will be cirrhosis and alcoholic. Post-sinusoidal will be hepatic sinusoidal obstruction and veno-occlusive syndrome. Whereas post-hepatic will be Budd-Chiari syndrome, inferior vena cava, Kevel-Beck, cardiac or restrictive cardiomyopathy, constrictive pericarditis, severe congestive. Further, we'll be discussing about the treatments. There are basically two main treatment for complication due to portal hypertension, that is esophageal varices. Primary prophylaxis, and second, prevention of rebleeding. So esophageal and gastric varices. Goal of treatment will be avoid bleeding or hemorrhage. So avoid alcohol, aspirin, and irritated foods. Respiratory infection if present should be treated promptly. If bleeding occurs, stabilize the patient, manage the airway, provide IV therapy, and followed by drug therapy may include octreotide IV should be given 50 to 100 microgram per hour by a continuous infusion, followed by oral. Uh, Vasopressin and other is beta adrenergic blockers like propranolol. Endoscopic sclerotherapy, treatment for acute or chronic bleeding varices. Whereas for endoscopic ligation, banding of varices is done. It has comparatively lower complications than sclerotherapy. Hence, it is the first line of treatment for acute bleeding. It controls acute bleeding in over 90% of the cases. When esophageal varices extend to the proximal stomach, band ligation is less successful. Third option we have is balloon tamponade, which controls hemorrhage by compression of varices, and most commonly uses Sennstaken's Blackamoor tube, which is shown in the figure, with an esophageal balloon tube, gastric aspiration tube, gastric balloon tube, and esophageal balloon tube and gastric balloon. Supportive measures for acute bleeding are immediately fresh frozen plasma should be given. Uh, Packed RBC should be given, vitamin K, histamine receptor blockers, proton pump inhibitors, and lactulose. Long-term management will be beta adrenergic blockers as repeated sclerotherapy or band ligation, portosystemic shunts, and propranolol. Shunting procedures use more after second major bleeding episodes like surgical versus non-surgical. So non-surgical procedures, transjugular intrahepatic portosystemic shunt, that is called as TIPS. Uh, it is a track created between the systemic and portal venous system used to redirect the blood flow. It decreases the portal venous pressure and decompresses the liver. Whereas surgical procedures like portocable shunt decreases the bleeding episodes, does not prolong the life, but patient dies of hepatic NK due to hyperammonemia that can cross blood-brain barrier. So other complication here, ascites and peripheral edema. So it is a accumulation of fluid within the peritoneal cavity. Most commonly, edema. Basically, pathophysiology is decreased choroid on chorionic pressure from impaired liver synthesis of albumin, and there will be an increased portocaval pressure from portal hypertension. Occurs basically at ankle, and if patient is on chronic lying down supine position, then presacral edema is seen. So pathophysiology will be of cirrhosis. So cirrhosis will lead to three basic pathologies. Increased lymph production. So increased lymph production will lead to dilatation of lymph channel, draining the liver. So it will lead to leakage of lymph into the abdominal cavity, which will lead to ascites. Another thing will be an portal hypertension, which leads to increased capillary filtration pressure, which leads to ascites. Third will be bacterial peritonitis, which will lead to increased capillary permeability, which leads to loss of plasma and ascites. Fourth will be hepatocellular failure, which will lead to decreased albumin synthesis, which and altered metabolism. So decreased albumin synthesis will cause decreased capillary oncotic pressure, which will lead to decreased effective plasma volume and leakage of plasma out of the vascular space. Peripheral arterial vasodilation will also decrease the effective plasma volume, and altered metabolism will lead to increased renin, aldosterone, and ADH hormone, which leads to increased renal absorption of sodium and water, which leads to ascites. So this is again cirrhosis, portal hypertension, planking vasodilation. So arterial underfilling will be there, which will lead to activation of vasoconstrictors and anti-natriuretic factors, which lead to sodium retention, followed by plasma volume expansion for the formation of ascites. So clinical features in ascites will be patient will come with an increase in abdominal gut, tightening of clothes. Patient will have at least 1 to 2 liters of fluid in abdomen before they are aware that there is an abdominal distension, followed by complications of respiratory distress due to pulling of diaphragm upward, malnourished and muscle wasting with excessive fatigue and weakness. So diagnosis and treatment will be when a patient presents with an ascites for the first time. It is recommended that diagnostic paracentesis be performed to characterize the fluid, that is total protein, albumin, blood cells, and culture should be done. In patient with cirrhosis, the protein concentration of ascitic fluid is quite low, with majority of the patient having an ascitic fluid protein concentration less than 1 gram per dl. The development of serum ascites to albumin gradient, that is SAG, is more than 1.1 gram per dl signifies ascites is most likely to be due to portal hypertension. When the SAV is less than 1.1 gram per dl, infectious or malignant should be the differential diagnosis. When level of ascitic fluid protein is very low, patient may be at increased risk of subacute bacterial peritonitis. Patient with small amount of ascites can be managed with dietary sodium restriction alone. However, if patient should also be advised to avoid canned or processed food as they contain more sodium content. When a moderate amount of ascites is present, diuretic therapy is usually given. Whereas traditionally, spironolactone is started at 100 to 200 mg per day, and if required, furosemide may be added 40 to 80 mg per kg per day, and increase at the rate of patient's compliance. So severe ascites, paracentesis is the to be done. So other complication is spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. It is a common and severe complication of ascites characterized by spontaneous infection of the ascitic fluid without any intra-abdominal source. So bacterial translocation is presumed mechanism of development of subacute bacterial peritonitis with a gut flora transversing the intestine into the mesenteric lymph node, leading to bacteremia and seeding of ascitic fluid. The most common involved is E. coli. Diagnosis is fluid sample. Absolute neutrophilic count should be more than 250 per microliter, and ascitic fluid culture should be. Treatment is empirical treatment should be started with third generation cephalosporin in patient with varicose hemorrhage. The frequency of SBP is significantly increased, and prophylaxis against SBP is recommended when patient present with upper GI bleed. Further, if the patient have recovered from an episode of SBP, once per week administration of antibiotic is used as prophylaxis for emergency. Another complication is hepatorenal syndrome. It is basically the functional is a form of functional renal failure without renal pathology that occurs in about 10% of the patient with advanced cirrhosis or acute liver failure. So there are marked disturbance in the arterial renal circulation in patient with hepatorenal syndrome. Includes an increase in vascular resistance accompanied by reduction in systemic vascular resistance. So diagnosis is usually made by large amount of ascites in patients who have stepwise progressive increase in creatinine levels. So there are two types of type 1 HRS and type 2 HRS. Type 1 is progressive impairment in renal function and significant reduction in creatinine level clearance within 1 to 2 weeks of presentation, whereas type 2 is reduction in GFR with elevation of serum creatinine level. So hepatorenal syndrome is often seen in patients with refractory ascites and requires exclusion of other causes of acute renal failure. So in past that we used to use dopamine or prostaglandin analog for renal vasodilation, but currently we are using as an alpha agonist midodrine that it basically increases the peripheral vascular resistance along with an octreotide that decreases the spine to blood flow, and intravenous albumin can be given. Best therapy for hepatorenal syndrome is liver transplant. So other complication is hepatic encaph or encephalopathy, that is a neuropsychiatric manifestation. So it's a terminal complication of liver disease. That is a basically a disorder of protein metabolism and excretion. So liver unable to convert ammonia to urea, or blood shunted pass the liver through. So ammonia stays in the systemic circulation. So ammonia crosses the blood-brain barrier, which is neurotoxic in nature. And another is ammonia leads to altered astrocyte function due to destruction of astrocytes. So there will be a brain edema can be seen in patient with severe NCAF associated with swelling of grey matter, and cerebral herniation can occur as a feared complication. So clinical manifestation will be patient will be a confused or exhibit a change in personality. Uh, Hysterexis, that is liver flaps. If patient has ascites, must be taped to rule out infection, and change in neurological and mental responsiveness ranging from sleep disturbance to lethargy or to deep coma. So treatment will be hydration and correction of electrolyte imbalance. The mainstay of treatment for NCAF, in addition to correcting precipitating factor, is used to use of lactulose. Lactulose is a non-absorbable disaccharide which results in colonic acidification. So purification ensures contributing to the elimination of nitrogenous product in the gut that are responsible for development of NCAF. The goal of lactulose therapy is to promote soft stools per day. Other antibiotic given are tablet rifaximin, which inhibits the growth of enteric ammonia producing bacteria. Dose of rifaximin is 50 mg twice a day has been very effective in encephalopathy without any known side effect as compared to metronidazole or neomycin. So other treatment for other complications are abnormality of coagulation, that is decreased synthesis of clotting factors or impaired clearance of anticoagulant. Vitamin K require biliary excretion for its subsequent absorption. Thus, the patient with a chronic cholestatic syndrome, vitamin K absorb is frequently diminished. uh, IV or IM vitamin K corrects that abnormality. When hepatic mass is reduced, cannot be corrected by parenteral vitamin K injections. Osteoporosis is the common in patient with chronic liver disease because of malabsorption of vitamin D, and there is a decrease in serum calcium. So treatment is with bisphosphonates. Thank you.